Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel observing the biblical feast of Passover, even as more than 100 hostages remain in captivity. How the war against Hamas in Gaza has hurt a key sector of the Israeli economy, the tourism industry. Here in the U.S., Congress passes an international aid package helping Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and remembering Mandisa. Musicians, singers, fans, and friends honoring the legacy of the Christian music artist who died unexpectedly. All those stories and more are ahead today, right here on CBN News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
We begin this half hour in Israel as Jews worldwide and throughout Israel will observe the biblical feast of Passover beginning tonight. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, while they celebrate freedom from the bondage of ancient Egypt, they also grieve for the more than 100 hostages still in Hamas captivity.
The head of Israel's military intelligence resigned his post, citing intelligence failures that led to the October 7th attack by Hamas. In his resignation letter, General Aharon Haliva wrote, "The intelligence directorate under my command did not live up to the task we were entrusted with. I carry that black day with me ever since, day after day, night after night. I will carry the horrible pain of the war with me forever." It's not clear if it will set the stage for more resignations, and some fear it comes at a dangerous time as Israel prepares for the Passover holiday and its troops are on high alert. Sunday night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to bring back the captives in Gaza.
On this Seder night, our hostages being held by Hamas are before our eyes. Their suffering and the suffering of their families rends our hearts and only strengthens our resolve to bring them back.
Netanyahu also took to social media to thank the U.S. Congress for passing critical military aid for Israel over the weekend. Yet Israeli leaders are also criticizing the U.S. State Department decision to sanction an Israeli battalion accused of torturing a West Bank Palestinian back in 2022. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant wrote, "Any attempt to criticize an entire unit casts a heavy shadow on the actions of the IDF, which operates to protect the citizens of Israel. Damage to one battalion affects the entire defense establishment. This is not the right path for partners and friends." Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik wrote on X, "Israel is currently fighting for her right to exist, and at a time when our greatest ally needs us the most. Joe Biden and Secretary Blinken are choosing to purposely undermine Israel to appease the pro-Hamas faction of the Democratic Party." Meanwhile, many Israeli troops won't be home to celebrate this week's Passover. Instead, they'll be guarding against threats from north, south, east, and west.
IDF forces are deployed along the entire length of the borders of the State of Israel to ensure the safety of the citizens of the State of Israel.
The Israeli government also released a video highlighting the plight of the hostages. It shows what Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter would look like without a family member at the table.
No family in the world should celebrate like this. 133 men, women, and children will not celebrate Passover with their families this year. On October 7th, they were abducted from their homes, and now they are held captive in Hamas terror tunnels.
At Seders in Israel and around the world, some Jews will be leaving one seat empty to remember those hostages.
Chris Mitchell joins us now with more. So, Chris, there was another terrorist attack in Jerusalem today. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it was in a neighborhood here in Jerusalem. Ephraim, it was a ramming attack. Several Orthodox men were standing on a corner. The video shows them being hit by a car driven by two Palestinian men. The car then turns the circle, rams into another car, and the two men get out with guns to murder the ones that were there on the ground. Miraculously, those guns jammed, and they ran away. Thankfully, they've been arrested. But it really, Ephraim, shows you how random and dangerous many of these rammings and or stabbing attacks can be. They can happen almost anywhere and very hard to defend against. But just the latest example of one of those terror attacks earlier today.
Let's talk about Israel's attack on Iran last week. How successful was Israel in penetrating Iran's defense?
Well, it was actually very successful, and what they did was destroy what's called the S-300 air defense system. Iran bought that from the Russians, which is presumably one of the most advanced air defense systems in the world. They are used to protect Iran's key nuclear sites. This one was in Isfahan, and one of the nuclear sites is not too far away, called Natanz. And it really sent a strong message to Iran, the message being that we can reach you and we can reach your nuclear sites. And all of this was done presumably without any Israeli aircraft being in Iranian, Jordanian, or even Israeli airspace. They were presumably F-35s, and they used a radar-evading missile called a Rampage. And yet, on the other hand, Ephraim, it was really calibrated to de-escalate the situation. The New York Times is reporting that they were planning to do a much more robust military strike against Iran, but they pulled those plans back in order to allow Iran to say that, they defended against Israeli military actions.
Chris, how serious is the Israeli government taking this U.S. plan to sanction an Israeli Defense Forces unit?
They're taking it very seriously. As you can see in our report, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, reacted. Netanyahu also reacted, against this. And they feel like this undermines the IDF. It wasn't only this IDF unit, but earlier this year, they sanctioned some settlers in Judea and Samaria. One of the points that I keep hearing over here, Ephraim, about the sanctions on this IDF unit and about those earlier sanctions in Judea and Samaria. And the point is this: where are the sanctions on the Palestinians or the Palestinian Authority? For example, Fatah, which is the political arm of the Palestinian Authority, they actually boasted that they took part in the October 7th massacre. The members of the Palestinian Authority cabinet, a number of those members, they praised terrorist attacks. So Netanyahu said basically, the Palestinians could be sanctioned thousands of times. And as Congresswoman Elise Stefanik said, she believes it was designed as a way to appease the Democratic left wing of the Democratic Party. So they see a double standard here with the sanctions on the IDF and settlers, but really nothing, if anything, on the Palestinian Authority.
Chris, here in the United States, we're seeing a surge in protest for Hamas and anti-Israel protests on Columbia and other college campuses. What's the reaction in Israel to these demonstrations?
Well, they've taken these protests very seriously. And some over here see a chilling comparison to what happened in the 1930s in Nazi Germany. I think people over here, not just the government, but Jews here in Israel, and I think Jews around the world, shocked at how virulent they are, how widespread they are, how quickly they've spread. And they're not just pro-Palestinian, but they're actually pro-Hamas, calling for the spread of the Intifada. They're calling for burning of Tel Aviv. If you listen to some of these protests, they're very virulent. Some are wondering, perhaps, this could spur Aliyah, which is the immigration of Jews back here to the land of Israel, and whether or not more Jews will be coming to Israel because of this widespread anti-Semitism. But taking these very, very seriously, Ephraim, and really shocked that these are coming at some of the most prestigious universities in America, Columbia, MIT, and as we know that the rabbi from Columbia is actually advising Jews not to come to the campus because it's so dangerous for them.
A key biblical holiday, Passover, begins tonight. How is it celebrated there in Israel, and why is this year so important?
Well, it's very important. The country is shutting down. I mean, even now, it's almost 2 in the afternoon here. So many people see this as a day off. A very important family time, usually significant every year, but especially these years as they celebrate the deliverance not only out of the hand of Pharaoh, but this year the grieving mourning for those that 133 hostages still in captivity. And that's why they covet and appreciate the prayers of Christians for their release, rescue, and their deliverance.
All right, we indeed continue to pray. Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your insights. Stay safe. And again, we are praying for you and our team there in Israel. The war in Gaza against Hamas has hit Israel's once thriving tourism industry extremely hard. As CBN's Chuck Holton reports from Jerusalem, area businesses are trying to weather these difficult times.
The streets of Jerusalem's old city, normally bustling with tourists, now lie eerily quiet. The number of visitors coming here plummeted by more than 80% during the last months of 2023. I'm at the Tower of David overlooking the old city of Jerusalem, and I am the only person in this entire complex. That's because of that sound you hear up above me, the fighter jets that are going overhead. This war has crushed tourism in Israel, and although it might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to be the only person in the entire Tower of David complex, for the people who make their living off of those tourists, this has been an absolute catastrophe.
Recently, when the war started, we had really terrible time because business came down, like I could say almost 100%.
Many shop owners in the old city have been forced to close their doors, unable to pay rent and taxes without the steady stream of tourists they've relied on for years.
You eat what you save now, okay? We are paying rent. We are paying our taxes, municipal taxes, electricity, water, everything is you have to pay. Because once you don't pay, I mean, it will add up and then you are in big trouble.
Instead of having sales a day, now we're having one sale probably in 2 weeks.
75–80% of the shops are closed.
I have a shop online. You know, many Christian tourists have came to here and, you know, I have a good reputation, and this is what have saved me. Other shops who have no reputation and have no online did not make it.
Those who want to visit also have a tough time getting here. Due to the Gaza conflict, only 45 out of the 250 airlines that once operated in the country are still flying, effectively isolating Israel from the rest of the world. The Palestinian Arab Muslim shopkeepers that are left down here in the old city are suffering right alongside everyone else. But the real frustrating thing is that in months of coming down here and talking to these guys, I've yet to find one single Palestinian shopkeeper who will condemn what happened on October 7th.
My hope is that both sides will understand that violence will bring violence and peace will bring peace, and time to forgive each other and start a new page.
After COVID and now the war, Israel's once thriving tourism industry is facing a multi-year catastrophe. The sector, which once employed more than 200,000 Israelis and accounted for 3% of the country's economy, will likely take years to recover. From Jerusalem, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, after a long, drawn-out political fight, the House of Representatives finally passed an aid bill that includes help for Israel as well as Ukraine and Taiwan. We're going to take a look at that story for you when we come back. Stay with us. After a long battle on Capitol Hill, a $95 billion package with aid for Ukraine, Israel, as well as Taiwan has passed the House and will be taken up by the Senate later this week. It also includes legislation to force the sale of the popular app TikTok. But getting this bill through the House could ultimately cost House Speaker Mike Johnson his job. CBN's Dale Hurd is on the story.
Following months of delays, the House finally pushed through a $95 billion foreign aid package that the Senate is expected to pass this week. It includes more than $60 billion for Ukraine and $26 billion for Israel. But House Speaker Mike Johnson needed help from the Democrats to get the aid bill over the finish line, angering some within his own party. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and 2 other members agreed on a motion to remove him as Speaker, but have yet to move forward.
He has completely betrayed the Republican Party. He has completely betrayed Republican voters all over the country, and he is absolutely working for the Democrats, passing the Biden administration's agenda.
Johnson may now need help from Democrats to keep his speakership, but a majority of Republicans are reportedly not backing any move to oust him.
Look, I think it's a relatively small number of Republican members. I think both sides have now seen how dangerous this is, how irresponsible it is. I think they're unlikely to remove the Speaker over that.
Detailed in an exclusive report from CBN News, a meeting with Ukrainian evangelicals in Washington reportedly played a role in Speaker Johnson, a Southern Baptist, giving his full backing to the aid for Ukraine.
Our primary and big message to Americans, especially brothers and sisters here, that there is a very bloody war happening in Ukraine, that we're being killed.
Also included in the aid package is legislation that would force the sale of the very popular social media app TikTok from its Chinese parent company or face a nationwide ban in the U.S.
To just ban 170 million Americans who are engaged in speech and livelihood. The federal judge in Montana struck it down. The judges struck it down when Trump tried this. I doubt it survives scrutiny in the Supreme Court.
But TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, is known to be under the control of the Chinese military. And the app is a data miner, reportedly stealing the personal information of millions of Americans and sending it back to communist China. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, remembering the Columbine school shooting 25 years later and how it was followed by more violence. Even so, there have also been stories of healing. We're going to bring you a look right after this. "25 years ago, 2 heavily armed students walked into Columbine High School in Colorado and opened fire, sending shockwaves across the country. That first mass school shooting became a watershed moment that would eventually lead to an epidemic of violence. Even out of that tragedy, survivors are sharing their stories of hope and healing with others. CBN's Brody Carter brings us the story.
These 5 students, say probably about 300 to 500.
Everyone around me got shot, and I begged him for 10 minutes not to shoot me.
The 1999 massacre in Littleton, Colorado resulted in 15 deaths, including the shooters. Now, 25 years later, many Americans still equate the word Columbine with terror, while authorities remember the day as a sad and frightening turning point.
Suddenly, we saw these innocent people being, shot down for no reason.
Suzanne Seibel is a safety and threat assessment expert.
Probably the most critical thing and the most positive thing it did was show us that there are signs, we can learn them, we can intervene sooner.
Seibel says springtime especially requires extra attention in identifying possible warning signs. She notes that in addition to Columbine, this season coincides with the anniversaries of more than 50 such shootings over the past 2 decades.
So I think that was another shock. It was like a new awareness that this can happen.
I think a lot of families are going to go home tonight and hug their kids a little tighter and hopefully say a few prayers.
It was less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours that I was in there.
Craig Scott survived the grisly scene at Columbine in the school's library, the scene of the most intense shooting where 10 victims were shot and killed, including 2 of his friends hiding next to him under a table.
They came over to where I was. I saw my friend Isaiah. They called him racial slurs. They tried to pull him out from underneath the table. They killed him. Then they killed my friend Matt. And they left me underneath that table. I thought I was going to die.
After escaping, Craig would learn his sister, Rachel Joy Scott, would become the first person killed that day. Rachel's story, however, would live on as an inspiration.
I've dedicated a lot of my life to sharing my sister's story, my story, and traveling around and speaking. My family started an organization to share the life and legacy of my sister.
Rachel's Challenge, started by Craig and his family, has grown to become the nation's largest school assembly program, with the goal of saving lives and preventing school violence.
Well, she had a prayer in her life, and it was to be used to impact people and to in a positive way. When she was 13 years old, she traced her hands like this on the back of an old dresser and wrote, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts."
Those hands have also touched Craig, who carries on the legacy by speaking to the importance of moving beyond your past, a lesson he learned through healing and advocacy.
My story matters, your story matters, but you're not your story. You have a past story and a current one happening right now. You have a future story.
His message of forgiveness is perhaps his most powerful.
Forgiveness is like setting a prisoner free and finding out that prisoner is you. So you have all this anger and you realize forgiveness is what sets you free from that.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, remembering Mandisa, the Grammy Award-winning artist, died after an historic career. We're going to hear about the tributes to her and how she glorified God in the midst of her struggles. We've got our story when we come back. Stay with us.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
And finally, this half hour, musicians, singers, fans, and friends have been remembering Mandisa. The Grammy Award-winning Christian music artist was found dead inside her home Thursday. The cause of her death remains unknown. Mandisa was known for her uplifting hits like Good Morning and Overcomer. Throughout her career, she collaborated with top Christian performers like Toby Mac, Matthew West, Michael W. Smith, and Kirk Franklin. She also authored 2 books, one of them telling her testimony in her book called Out of the Dark, My Journey Through the Shadows to Find God's Joy. She talked about her lifelong struggles with depression and trusting in God for healing, and how the Lord redeemed those broken things in her life for His glory and her good. She also had been very open in interviews with CBN News and other Christian outlets like K-Love. You can learn more about Mandisa's life and the tributes at cbnnews.com. Time now for your Monday motivation. I'll leave you with this thought as we begin another week together. Know this: God has a plan, and it is perfect. Circumstances may not look like it, and emotions may not feel like it, but the truth remains. God has a plan, and His plan is perfect. Trust Him and trust that truth. God has a perfect plan for you. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That's cbnnews.com. We wish you a marvelous Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.